15th, 2020, and it's 6 p.m. and we welcome you to tonight's forum. This is I'm Abner Perney, immediate past president of the Salina Area League of Women Voters. Today's forum is sponsored by the Salina League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization of women and men of every age, race, background, and political belief. Through more than 1,200 leagues, state leagues, these are local leagues, state leagues, and the national organization, league members work to promote citizen action on local, state, and national issues, and to register and vote. The league is an organization, does not support any particular candidates. Our goal for today's forum is to provide the Salina area voters with information about the candidates in the contested races on the ballots for the primary election coming right up on August 4th. Voters may vote by mail or vote in advance at the office of the county clerk, which is room 215 in the city county building at 300 West Ash. I know that there was advance mailing to everyone for the application to vote by written ballot in advance. So if you have that and want to use it, it's already in your possession. If you still need it, it's readily available from the county clerk in the city county building. We thank the Salina Area Chamber of Commerce for the use of this Visit Salina Annex building. We also thank Salina Media Connection and Smoky Hills Public Broadcasting for being here to video this event. Today's forum will begin with our candidates for the Saline County Attorney. Following that, we'll have candidates for the Saline County Commission District Number 3, the Kansas House of Representatives, District 69 and District 71, and then the Kansas Senate District 24. All the candidates in these contests were invited to participate. However, some of the candidates will not be here tonight due to other conflicts. Some of the candidates also answered a written questionnaire from the League of Women Voters. Those are posted on our league website, www.lwvsalina.org. Okay, so our first segment is going to feature the Republican candidates for the Saline County Attorney. They are here to my right, Jeff Ebel and Brock Abbey. Ann Zimmerman's going to conduct this first session and ask the questions, and here is Ann Zimmerman, our Vice President.
Thank you. My job right now is to go over the rules. We will start this session and every session with 1 minute opening remarks by the candidates. We will alternate the order of the candidates answering questions, and we will start with questions from the media panel. Then we will take questions from the audience. We hope that you can see the email and cell phone number to text. Send us your questions, and our members will be transcribing them and bringing them up to us so that we can ask those questions to the candidates after the initial questions from the media panel. Questions must pertain to all candidates, and candidates will have 1 minute to answer each question. Then we will have 1 minute closing remarks by the candidates, and we will then take a break for the next group. So to start out with, we're starting in alphabetical order. So Brock, Abbey, you have 1 minute for an opening statement.
Thank you. Thank you first, Abner and Ms. Zimmerman, for hosting this. This is obviously one of the only public events where people are going to be able to see the candidates. I want to spend my opening with giving everyone a little bit of a background about me. Starting with, I got my bachelor's degree from the University of Nebraska at Kearney, and then right after that went to Washburn University School of Law. While I was there, I did an externship with a federal judge. I worked for a federal judge one summer. That was based on a merit selection process, and I also, during that summer, got a student license. So when I was done clerking for Eric Melgren as the federal judge, I immediately went in and began as a prosecutor working for the Sherman County Attorney out in Goodland, prosecuting cases when I could from law school a lot of it ended up being writing and drafting briefs and that sort of thing. I graduated Washburn 15 out of 142 people in my class, and while waiting for the bar exam to take place and after the bar exam waiting for the results, I went back out to Goodland and began working.
Thank you. The next opening remark is from Jeff Ebel.
Hi, my name is Jeff Ebel, and I'm asking for your vote on August the 4th to be your next Saline County attorney. I've been a Saline County resident for over 31 years. This is where I went to school, it's where I've got married, it's where I've worked my whole life, it's where I'm raising my kids, it's where we go to church, it's where we volunteer with our time. This is truly my home. So why do I want to be your next Saline County attorney? For me, the answer is very simple. I want to give back and serve my fellow citizens. I have previously served my community by being a corrections officer, a police officer with the Salina Police Department. I worked at the Saline County Attorney's Office as a prosecutor myself for over 8.5 years. For the last 7 years, I've been working as a defense attorney with my own firm here in town. I believe with this knowledge, education, and experience, I am the best candidate to be your next Saline County attorney going forward. Thank you.
Okay, we have a media panel of two gentlemen, Erin Anders from the Salina Journal and Paul Kirkwood from Salina Media Connection. We had a third invited from KSAL and Rockingham, and they are not available tonight. Okay, so you get to each take, we'll alternate back and forth. Erin, you're up first because of our alphabetical order to ask a question, and each candidate gets a minute or 2 minutes? Minute to respond.
Okay, well, first off, I would just like to thank all of the candidates for being here, and thank you for running for your respective offices. Thank you for caring enough to help improve Saline County, our surrounding counties, and the state of Kansas. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to address these various issues and answering these questions with respect and honesty. My first question is, this past month we have seen tensions over police brutality, removal of historic statues, the change of names of professional sports teams, and general race tensions have mounted more than ever. How can we work together to foster and improve race relations and fairness for all Americans?
And Brock should begin.
I like the idea that some of which is already going on.
Yeah, but I think it should be Jeff, because Brock began the opening statement.
Oh, well, these are the questions. Okay. All right, well, I'm sorry that we're confused on our procedure. If Mr. Ebel, Jeff would begin at this time. We're supposed to alternate back and forth between you.
Sure. To me, the biggest thing, honestly, is to have an open and honest dialogue with all the parties involved. I believe that the county attorney's office, while one doesn't necessarily set policy per se, we're not the ones passing the law, we're the ones charged with enforcing the law. But I still believe that there should be honest communication and dialogue between all the parties involved. I believe if there's a specific issue going on in our community, that those community leaders need to approach the county attorney's office, that the sheriff and the police department, we all need to get together in a room and sit down and talk about those issues to see what can and cannot happen. Obviously, such things as desecration of public statues and things like that, it's a violation of criminal law, so those need to be addressed in a separate issue, in a different form. But again, I think we still have to have an honest conversation as to why those issues are happening. Not to say that they won't get prosecuted, but at the same time, that dialogue needs to be there so that, at least as a prosecutor, we're having the input from everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Ebel. Mr. Abbey.
I think some of it's already occurring in our community. There's outreach programs between law enforcement and our community, Coffee with the Cop, the Fish with the Cop. I think that promotes some community awareness, and it gets the law enforcement out interacting with the community in the way that they don't usually do in enforcement actions. So I agree those sorts of things can continue, and I agree that we should promote the peaceful protests, allow people to exercise their First Amendment rights, but also have a law enforcement side of it where they're keeping the peace, they're not engaging in violent or riot behaviors or destroying public properties. Also against the destruction of public statutes and memorials and that sort of thing, and those I also think should be prosecuted.
Thank you, Mr. Abbey. It's now time for Paul Kirkwood to ask a question.
There's been talk about funding a new jail due to the overcrowding in our current one. What are your opinions on the needs of a new jail for this community?
Mr. Abbey starts this time.
Thank you. I think that adding capacity to the jail is something we need to do. This community is spending entirely way too much money on housing people in out-of-county jurisdictions, tens and maybe hundreds of miles away, which is an expense to house them there. It's an expense to transport them back and forth to court here in Saline County. And so I think we do need to expand the jail. I don't think we can prevent people from committing crimes or all crimes, and so a jail is necessary to keep those people, especially the violent criminals, out of society so they're no longer able to do harm here. And without the jail capacity to do that, we're all going to have to worry about them being released back into our community and not being safe.
And now Mr. Ebel, please.
As a former corrections officer, I could say I spent a lot of time inside the Saline County Jail, but I guess for the good reason. I was working there. I will say this, at this point in time, I do believe that the current jail is getting antiquated, and I would be in favor of supporting building a new jail at this point in time. Crime numbers don't lie. Crime's on the increase. We have more people in jail than ever. I do agree that transporting and housing people out of county is adding more to our budget than what needs to be. If that means having a bigger jail to accommodate some of those folks that need to be locked up, that probably be the cost that we would have to do at this point in time. Overall, I do think that the crime numbers, I like to see them go down. I like to see less people in custody, but again, some of those things are out of our control, and we can only do what we can do. And so I am in favor, though, of building a new jail.
Thank you. Mr. Andrews, again, from the Salina Journal.
Illegal drug usage, it has been a problem throughout Saline County and the state and the nation. How would you go about reducing the amount of illegal drug activity in our county?
I'm sorry, can you re-say the first part of that question?
Illegal drug usage has and has continued to be a problem throughout Saline County and the state and the nation. How would you go about reducing the amount of illegal drug activity in our county?
Mr. Ebel,
Okay,
yes.
let's make sure
It is
it
your
was
turn.
coming to me. It's kind of a two-part question. One, again, as the county attorney, we don't make the law. You know, we can only enforce what the law is in place at the time. With that being said, though, we're also given discretion as prosecutors. And so the question, I think, becomes one of, is there a substance abuse problem in our community? Absolutely, 100% there is. Is locking them up the best way to handle that? I'm going to argue that's not. While that's appropriate in some cases, obviously I don't want to see kids out there getting sold drugs on the school ground. I don't want to see people out selling massive quantities of drugs and things like that. However, do we need to be locking people up in jail for extended periods of time for having a little bit of methamphetamine or a little bit of marijuana? I think our community and its resources and time is better served by looking at other routes as far as drug treatment, supervision, probation, and those type of things. And so in that regard, yes, it's an issue, but it's one I think with a focus and discretion we can reduce.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ebel. Mr. Abbey, please.
The substance abuse issue in Saline County is, in my belief, is attributable to the drug distribution problem in Saline County. Our office doesn't focus much on misdemeanor marijuana, those simple possession cases. That's mostly a city issue now that they have an ordinance. And so what we can do as county attorneys are making sure that the addicts, the people that are truly addicts, get the substance abuse help they need That can come through pretrial intervention. It can come through post-conviction. The state provides funding for certain felony convictions to get drug treatment. And then on the other end, like I said, with distribution, those that are selling and distributing meth and drugs in our community need to be punished more severely and harshly and consistently, I think, to keep them out of our community and keep them from selling in the future and provide a deterrent from this enterprise of making money of selling drugs in our community.
Thank you, Mr. Abbey. We return to Salina Media Connection, Mr. Kirkwood, for the next question.
I wanted to talk a little bit about combating recidivism, and you mentioned that the number of inmates are way higher. We have apparently more offenders for certain crimes than others. How much, you mentioned your discretion as a prosecutor. In what ways can you demonstrate that, or in what ways can you use that discretion in order to, for example, instead of jailing an inmate, encourage certain social avenues of rehabilitation to funnel them back to being productive members in society instead of a drain on taxpayer resources and just throwing them in jail? And can you point to maybe your knowledge base or your past experience where you've handled a situation like that?
Mr. Abbey, I believe, is first.
Prosecutorial discretion, I think there's a misconception that our prisons and jails are full of people who are just charged with simple possession crimes. That's pretty unusual. I think the statistics show that Saline County is one of the counties that gives probation to people who should otherwise go to prison on drug crimes more than other counties. And so that's one step. We're saving some money, putting them on probation, give them a chance at treatment, and that step first before they go to prison. The other kind of limitation I see on reducing recidivism and going back through the jail and prison is a lot of the crime in Saline County is attributable to substance abuse, whether it's theft and burglaries and forgeries and that sort of thing. And those, when you get into that, you start getting into victims of crime, real people who want to see those cases prosecuted. And so it's my position as a prosecutor that I have an obligation to promote those victims' interests and prosecute those crimes as well.
Thank you. And Mr. Ebel.
I agree with that as well, as far as if there's victims of actual crime that are out monetary loss or out physical violence or harm, obviously those cases need to be prosecuted differently than what you indicate, maybe just simple drug possession charges and things like that. I think the recidivism in this county, a lot of it is attributable to substance abuse issues. We see it all the time because I've been practicing law for 17 years, and I think Mr. Abbey would agree that almost every case we see coming through is that someone's addicted to a drug or alcohol. And at that point in time, the biggest issue is how do we get those people on probation or get them into a drug treatment program to where they can learn the tools to cope in our society? What things can we do to offer them success? How can we get them jobs? How we can get them transportation to and from to make them productive members of society? Until that underlying issue is firmly addressed by the legislature, I don't think we're going to have much of a chance of reducing the recidivism rate other than, trying to work with them as best we can through the court system.
Thank you, Mr. Ebel. Next question, I believe, will be our last question. We'll return to Erin Anders of the Salina Adjournment.
How can you ensure all people are treated equally during their interactions with law enforcement officers?
Well, that's a goal we should all strive for, and hope for out of our law enforcement officers. Obviously, as the county attorney, if we would see any kind of systematic oppression as far as, certain officers who are treating people of color or any other type of people a certain way, that needs to be brought up and addressed through their supervisors and that situation taken control of right away. I don't believe that is a problem in our community, thankfully. I think our officers are here in our town are very fair, very just in what they do. I think they strive to be excellent in all they do. I think what Chief Nelson did and said during the George Floyd things, I guess, protest right after it happened. I mean, he came out and made some statements. He'd be walking down the streets with people. I think that's what needs to be encouraged. I think that's the goal of all our officers to be looking at. And again, if there would be an issue that needs to be addressed and brought to the attention.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Abbey.
Sure. In my experience too now, in over 7 years, 8 years about here in Saline County, we don't have this issue either. We have several hundred to over 1,000 criminal cases a year going through the county attorney's office. It's rare to even get an allegation of this racial-based policing there. I would say less than 5 a year of accusations even. That's how rare it is. And so, but ways that it's counteracted, I think that law enforcement has their own certification processes, C-posts that can police that if there's police officers that they believe are race-based policing. The Attorney General's office gets a report every year from every law enforcement agency about allegations of race-based policing. There's a suppression remedy through the courts that, and this is the allegation I'm talking about, defendants can file a motion and say I was targeted because of my race, and the court has a hearing. If the court finds it, then they suppress the evidence. And that hasn't happened to my knowledge here in my years here. And so I just don't see it's an issue here. And I think...
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. We're now going to switch to questions from the audience, and Zimmerman will take over that, reading and coordinating those questions and answers.
Thank you, Abner. I have several, and I don't know if you've had more come in since the one batch came up to me earlier, but you can bring them up if there are more. The first question, let's see, who started that last one? Is that?
Mr. Ebel.
You did. Okay, so Mr. Abbey will start on this one. Being an avid prosecutor and advocate for victims is a huge responsibility of serving as county attorney. Please tell us the highest level of felony you have prosecuted, how many jury trials you prosecuted, and the length of your longest trial, and how many cases you have argued to the Supreme Court on behalf of victims and citizens of Saline County.
Okay. Try and get it all in a minute. 3 cases to the Kansas Supreme Court, other cases to the Kansas Court of Appeals. My highest level of jury trial is first-degree murder, those highest offenses in Kansas. I've done 2 of those, by the way, and other lesser levels of homicide. And since 2014, that's been the majority of my practice here in the Saline County Attorney's Office, is those upper and higher level felonies. Total number of jury trials, I got a printout of all the jury trials and started going through them. My busiest time was I did 5 jury trials in 3 weeks one time, but usually over 10 a year, and so I would say dozens, maybe 100 jury trials, maybe. It's an estimation.
Thank you, Mr. Ebel.
As far as my jury trial experience, I would say my number is probably about the same. It's probably up towards about 100 jury trials. I know I had 1 week in particular when I was at the county attorney's office where I had 3 jury trials all in 1 week. So that was quite stressful. As far as Kansas appellate court arguments, again, I can't put a number on that. It's been several times, several appellate briefs I have written. As far as prosecution of crimes, I have prosecuted a wide variety of crimes. I have defended now as a defense attorney level 1 severity offenses. I had a client down in McPherson County who was charged with a level 1 offense and was successful in obtaining a verdict favorable to him, I guess I'll say. And so just 17 years as a prosecutor and as a defense attorney, I have numerous cases and experience under my belt.
Thank you. The next question, we'll start with Mr. Ebel. This is from a young person in Salina, new voter. He said that people in the nation's jails and prisons are at a much higher risk of contracting and dying from COVID-19. The pandemic has further revealed the injustices of the current system of mass incarceration of people of color. As a county attorney, will you work to reduce the total number of people held in the Saline County Jail? If so, how? And if not, why not?
I'm not going to actively seek to reduce the number of people sitting in the Saline County Jail. Obviously, a lot of those people are there for a particular reason. Again, justice is something that needs to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. That's the definition of justice. every case is different. Every case is unique. We have to look at all the facts, circumstances, and all the people involved in every particular kind of case to make a decision as to what's just for that case. I understand that there's arguments that people of color are being not being treated fairly, and are incarcerated at a higher rate. But again, I don't see that here in our county jail. Again, I don't think our officers or any of our prosecutors or anyone involved in the current judicial system has made that a case. And so I would say while that might be applicable to other places in the country, it's not applicable here.
Thank you, Mr. Abbey.
Thank you. I too, as a prosecutor, prosecutors aren't the police officers out on the street looking for crime. We kind of take what comes to us. And so people who want to reduce the population of the jail, the next question is, who do you let out? There's some violent offenders in there, clearly, severe violent offenders, drug dealers, those ones that are causing additional problems in our community. And so I'm not in favor of reducing the jail population without some sort of risk assessment. And the way that's working now is there's a pretrial program done by Community Corrections where everyone's interviewed, they're given a score, a bond recommendation by Community Corrections. Sometimes it's an OR, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's a dollar amount the judge sets. But I think the important part of it is to know is that prosecutors aren't the only ones in that process saying you get to stay in jail and you get out. It's a risk assessment. It's really an assessment of likely to return to court and danger to the community. And those ones that are a danger or unlikely to return get a higher bond.
Thank you. Here's another question from a young person. 3 out of, let's see, this will be Mr. Abbey to start. 3 out of every 5 people in jails across the United States have not been convicted of a crime. They are being held pre-trial on cash bail, which they are unable to pay, and many on low-level nonviolent offenses. What is your position on the system of cash bail? As county attorney, will you reduce the use of cash bail?
I think it's working the way it is now with pretrial, I guess is my answer. The people who are determined to be low risk get let out, and the people who don't. If you have a cash bond, it's because you've been determined to be a higher risk to the community, or you've been determined that you have a high likelihood or a higher likelihood that you're not going to return to court, and that's the function of bond and bail. The other thing is we have a speedy trial time, and so all the people that are perhaps let out and not coming back are clogging up our court system with the people who are continually appearing and participating in their system. And if you continue to let that happen so much that they're clogging up the system that much, it's going to be a fight to get court time and trial time to give everyone a fair trial, victims and defendants alike.
Thank you. Mr. Ebel?
I think the answer to that question lies in what we're trying to do right now with the pretrial supervision program. The problem is this: we have the low-level offenders who are getting let out on bond, but the problem is they still don't show up for their next court hearing. So then what do you do? It becomes the question: do you arrest them again and have them brought back in and held in custody until their next court appearance? Or do you let them back out again, hope they make it to the next one? It's an ongoing problem, and it's a real problem. I do believe that some situations our cash bond system here is a little high. I would do a lot of work down in other counties, and their bonds are considerably lower than Saline County bonds. And their appearance rate, I would say, is pretty much on par with what Saline County is. And so on my firsthand experience, I don't think we would necessarily be having less people show up for court. However, I think we could probably reduce the cash bond system to make it more affordable so people can get out.
Thank you. We have very little time left. One, maybe two, but probably only one question. This one says that as a county attorney, you would have enormous influence regarding who goes to trial and who ends up in jail. And one option is the diversion option, and there is evidence that Saline County historically underutilizes diversion, placing us on significantly lower than the state average. How would you use the diversion options?
I believe diversion can be a great tool with the right candidate and with the right person. Obviously, you're not going to offer diversion to repeat offenders, someone who has never learned their lesson. You want to use diversion for first-time offenders, or maybe even a second-time offender if the prior offense was a long time ago. I think our current diversion policy is too strict here in Saline County. Again, with my practice taking me into a lot of other counties, McPherson and Dixon County and Ellsworth and Rice counties, their diversion policies seem to be a little bit more, I don't want to say lenient, but easier to work with. And it gives people who maybe deserve a chance to work the diversion. Again, plus, the terms of the diversion most of the time are the same terms that are going to happen to a person if they're convicted and they're placed on probation. Most of the time, as part of that diversion, they have to undergo drug treatment, pay fines, costs, and why not give them the added benefit of trying to have their case dismissed before it would actually go to a trial?
Thank you. Mr. Abbott.
Yep. The current diversion policy in the county attorney's office, some things within it are limited by statutes. For instance, you can't have more than one diversion for DUI in your lifetime. Diversions on domestic batteries are limited, those sorts of things. And the county attorney's policy is consistent with that. Other restrictions or prohibitions on diversion are serious violent felonies. If you interfere or obstruct the police, those sorts of things, depending on what the victim wants, whether you can get a diversion or not. I think all of those are appropriate case-by-case determinations. And the other thing about is on our complaints, every complaint that's filed now, it has a diversion notification that says our office has a diversion policy. Here's how you can access it to see if you qualify. So right up front, our office is very open about making the diversion policy open to people to inspect to see if they qualify, if that's something they're interested in, and see if and if not, then they don't. But and then the other thing is capacity. Diversions have to be supervised, and we have an investigator in our office who supervises the diversions, and if you expand it, you're going to need more resources.
One more question then, Mr. Abbey. How would you exercise your prosecutorial discretion in order for mentally ill addicts to receive treatment before jail time?
Mentally ill addicts, did I hear you?
Addicts,
Okay.
yeah, sorry.
There's interesting things going on with the state legislature on funding that. There's the ideas of veterans courts that are, a lot of them are the people we see with mental illness, and then the drug court we have now. A lot of the people in there have a dual diagnosis, a mental illness as well as a drug issue. And when those two come into play, it's harder to combat both of them. It's harder to solve the mental health issue and the drug issue. And so the drug program, I support it. Helps. It's kind of one of the limited resources we do have within the court system to help with mental health. We also frequently, as conditions of probation, again, all the people who get probation have a screen, and if the probation screener determines that mental health is an issue, they're ordered to get a mental health intake and assessment, and then the probation officer can determine or follow up and make sure whether they're complying with that and getting the mental health they need as part of probation, again, keeping them out of jail.
Thank you. Mr. Ebel.
Could I have you repeat the question to me?
Yes, how would you exercise your prosecutorial discretion in order for mentally ill addicts to receive treatment before jail time?
Before jail time, okay. Well, again, I think a lot of that goes back to the last question we were talking about, having possibly a diversion program available. If it's a client or a defendant who has known criminal mental health issues that are documented, maybe running them through the court system is not the best course of action. Maybe getting early on it and having them obtain the mental health therapy, mental health treatment, drug treatment up front is the way to go. And that's something to consider, and something to keep open and to look at. Again, post-conviction, at that point in time, a lot of it, again, is dictated by the current statute. The criminal history places them in the appropriate grid box where they, based on their criminal history, most likely they're going to receive probation in this jurisdiction. They're going to receive drug court and all the resources that come along with that, along with the mental health evaluations and the orders to follow through with all those kind of therapies.
Thank you, thank you. I think we have run out of time for questions. At this point, we'll have 1 minute each for the candidate to make closing remarks, and Mr. Ebel goes first on that also.
I want to thank the Salina League of Women Voters and all the participants for hosting this event. I want to thank everyone who's taken the time to watch this. As I stated earlier, Saline County is my home. It's why I decided I wanted to run for Saline County Attorney. I want to give back and serve my fellow citizens. I believe that with my prior experience, knowledge, education, that I am the ideal candidate to lead the county attorney's office going forward. I believe that the search for truth and justice is paramount to the county attorney and what their goal and objectives are. I believe that I am that candidate that has the experience. I've been practicing law for 17 years, almost twice as long as my opponent. I believe, again, that I am the best candidate. My name is Jeff Ebel, and I'm asking for your vote on August the 4th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ebel, and Mr. Abbey, finish off today.
Mr. Perney, my closing will kind of be a continuation or finishing of my opening, but I've been doing this for about 10 years as a prosecutor the entire time, starting from law school to being Sherman County Attorney, and then having Ellen Mitchell hire me as Assistant County Attorney until now. I still work in the Saline County Attorney's office right next door. I came over here from work this evening. During my time, I've prosecuted the highest level of felonies, and I believe that, and having my experience in that office for this long and doing that sort of thing, I'm the best one to lead that office. I can tell you that of 3 prosecutors that have worked in that office, with years with myself and years with Mr. Ebel, Ellen Mitchell, the county attorney, now endorses me. Christina Trocek, the city attorney, endorses me. Amy Norton, who's leaving our office to work in the Attorney General's office as of Friday, endorses me. And as of yesterday, the Saline County Sheriff's Office's Fraternal Order of Police endorses me as well.
Thank you. Thank you to the candidates for coming for the forum tonight. We're going to take a few minutes break, about 7 or 8 minutes, and we're going to sanitize the tables in honor of COVID-19 and prepare for the Saline County Commissioner District 3 candidates coming up. And we want to remind everybody to vote on or before August 4th. Thank you.
I'm Abner Perney, immediate past president of the Salina League of Women Voters. And this is segment 2 of our July 15th candidate forum for the contested issues, the contested positions coming up August 4th. Today's forum is sponsored by the Salina League of Women Voters, a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization of women and men of every age, race, background, and political belief. There are more than 1,200 local leagues, state leagues, and the national organization, and through those, league members work to promote citizen action on local, state, and national issues. The league, as an organization, does not support any particular candidates. Our goal for today's forum is to provide Salina area voters with information about the candidates in the contested races, which will be on the ballots for the primary election of August 4th. Voters may vote by mail in advance or vote in advance at the office of the county clerk, which is room 215 in the City County Building, 300 West Ash in Salina. We also thank the Salina Area Chamber of Commerce for the use of this facility, the Visit Salina Annex. We also thank Salina Media Connection and Smoky Hills Public Broadcasting System for being here to video this event. The first segment already featured candidates for the Salina County Attorney position. Some of our candidates have answered a questionnaire that we sent out from the League of Women Voters. Those are available for your review on the internet at www.lwvsalina.org. At this time, we're talking about the Saline County Commission District 3. There are 2 candidates. To the farthest right is Randy Duncan, who is, coincidentally enough, a former county commissioner, coming back to challenge the incumbent Rodger Sparks, who is sitting closer here to the left of the 2 candidates. Ann Zimmerman, our vice president, at the present time will take over from here. Take it, Ann.
Thank you, Abner. I will be reading the rules here. We will have 1-minute opening remarks by the candidates. We will alternate the order that the candidates answer the questions. Who starts with the answer? We will start with questions from the media panel, and then we will take questions from the audience. We hope that you can see on your screen the email address to email us a question, and the cell phone number to text us a question, and we will have those transcribed by our members here and bring them up to us, moderators, to be asked of the candidates. Questions should pertain to all candidates, not just one. The candidates will have 1 minute to answer each question, and then we will have 1 minute closing remarks by the candidates. We will start with the 1 minute opening remarks, and we're starting in alphabetical order, so we'll start with Randy Duncan.
Okay, thank you very much, Ann. Again, thank you to you and the sponsors for having us here this evening. Again, my name's Randy Duncan, and I first arrived in Saline County in Salina in 1979, or 41 years ago. First working as a waiter, and then later for the City of Salina Police Department. Captain Huff and Glenn Kokanowski and Darrell Wilson were in the department at that time. I am now, my current career, and has been for many 30-some years, I'm in my career is promotional marketing and apparel. I was active in the Republican Party almost from the very beginning when Ben Vidrickson was appointed to the state Senate, later becoming party chairman for 15 consecutive years. I thought I retired at that time, but went on to become chairman of the 1st Congressional District of the Kansas Republican Party for 12 consecutive years. I'm a pro-life, pro-Second Amendment party member, always have been all my life. I did serve on the Saline County Commission for 2 terms, or a total of 8 years. From 2007 to 2015. My fellow county commissioners elected me chairman, and it's great to be here. Thank you very, very much. A minute goes fast.
Thank you, and yes, it does. Mr. Sparks, Rodger Sparks.
Well, thank you, Salina League of Women Voters, and I want to thank everyone in District 3 in 2016 to vote me in as your representative as a county commissioner, 1 of 5. We've been through a lot of changes in those 3.5 years, and a lot of things happened. And first off, I've served in the past as a treasurer for Mr. Duncan when he was chair for years. Yep. Then when he went further, I was a chair for this GOP for a few years, and then I've been a committee person in my district for almost 30 years, and I was on the board at OCSK for 16 years. I've been on the Salina Technical College Drafting Committee for over 30 years, and I was on the Southeast of Saline Drafting Committee board out there for years until they closed their drafting department. After I moved here in 1971, in 1972 I had a great job, and then I retired in just a few years back here, and I've retired. I've lived in my district for 43 years. And I wanted to go ahead and service that department. So I thank you for allowing me to be your commissioner.
Thank you, and I'm not sure I went over with you that they're holding up the yellow card at 15 seconds.
Oh, okay.
And the red is stopped, so. We are now ready for the media panel, which Abner will be moderating.
Okay, we have a media panel of 2 gentlemen, Erin Anders from the Salina Journal and Paul Kirkwood from Salina Media Connection. And Mr. Kirkwood gets the honors of the first question for this session. And the first respondent will be Mr. Sparks.
Mr. Sparks, Mr. Duncan, thank you so much for coming here today, being willing to answer questions and dedicating years of your lives to public work. My first question, in your opinion, what is the current most pressing issue for the County Commission to solve?
Wow. Getting over this COVID-19 is the biggest thing that we've got to get over. Other than that, I mean, I'll put that still as one of the major biggest factors. I think second to that is our, I'm going to say our jail. I still feel that that's one of our biggest issues we got coming forth. It's amazing that, what's happened is our, the clientele keeps getting smaller, but we keep getting bigger. And I don't know if that's what you're after. I mean, but that's what I feel is that one of our biggest is jail coming up down the road.
Okay, thank you, and let's go with Randy Duncan's.
Well, the first thing that came to my mind, and Commissioner Sparks spoke of it, was a jail. It was a pressing issue in my 8 years on the county commission. I served on 3 boards of 3. What I mean by that, I served with two different commissioners, each of my boards of 3 during my 8 years. And then on my final couple of years on the commission, we put forth a plan for the citizens of Saline County to vote on I believe it was a 1% sales tax for a period of 10 years. The community, the citizens of Saline County voted that down. I didn't favor that plan. I thought it was the Cadillac plan, as I often called it, and it was too high of a tax for too long. I wanted a smaller plan. We, at the time, did house our juveniles over in Geary County in Junction City, and we felt that was a good plan. I know time goes fast. My apologies.
And excuse me for my alarming phone. Mr. Anders from the Salina Journal, next question.
I have a very similar question that Paul answered, but then I also would kind of have a follow-up to what you guys were talking about. So the question I had was, what are the top issues that Saline County is facing right now? A lot of you talked about the jail, and then what are some plans that you have for some steps that you're planning on taking to help fix those problems?
Mr. Duncan's first at this time.
Okay. As we have talked about, that is an ongoing problem. When I served on the commission previously, we did one of the initial problems or steps we took at that time with our commission, when I served on the commission at that time. We immediately, in conjunction with Sheriff Kokonowski at the time, also working with his right-hand man, Rodger Solden, who was the current sheriff, we closed the juvenile center, and because it was unsafe, it was not adequate for our youth. And we also worked with Andy Grievous at the time, as well as Rodger Solden and Sheriff Kokonowski, and we entered into our agreement with Geary County. And then we also, because there were so many surrounding counties that had expanded their jails, we were housing our prisoners over in surrounding counties. There needs to be another plan for the citizens to vote on.
Mr. Sparks, your minute, please.
Okay. Thank you. I want to just say first that it's like the jail. We had many community meetings in regards to our jail proposals, what's happening there. I want to first say is that the things happening, the steps that we did take in the past is helping out with any grievous and community corrections and moving into a lot safer, one building that's fitting their needs a whole lot better, and working a whole lot of different avenues with the Central Kansas Mental Health Foundation, because there's a lot of need for a lot of things happening that the jail just doesn't have the room to do right now. And the new jail coming forward, having a lot of different avenues on how to help the clients once they're in there and getting them out, and how to handle it once they get out, is one of our biggest goals that we got coming forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question is, are we back to Paul? We're back to Paul. Thank you.
Compared to the 3-person county commission a few years back, how do you feel about the current 5-person county commission? How has that affected things like your decision making? And do you foresee expanding the number of members for the county commission sometime in the future?
And I'll go first because it's my turn now. I just want to say, I went to the meetings when they had just went to the 5 county meetings. I started going to them before I was elected, and I, being one of the 5 members, it's a great scenario. I mean, because we all get along. We got a lot of diverse thought processes going on, which does help in making a lot of decisions. We don't always make the same decisions. We always go on down the road. Once we've made the decision, we click our heels and go on down the road. It's working out very well. I get along. It's the processes which it's working now, I don't see it getting any larger. And I think the 5-member meeting has worked out real well, and I don't see it actually going back to a 3. I don't see that happening, but I think the 5 has worked out well, and I'm proud to be part of that 5.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Duncan.
Well, as some of you may remember, I wasn't initially in favor of it, neither was the board I served with at the time in favor of it. However, it was a community choice. The community petitioned for it. They put it on the ballot, and they voted overwhelmingly in favor of it. So I never had an opportunity to serve with 5. However, since that time, I think it's a good thing. It takes, it's less pressure. If you had a board of 3, it was more difficult. If 2 members had conflicts, it was hard to hold a meeting. So I think now, in hindsight, looking at it, I think it's a good thing. It also, it enables the commission or 2 members of the board to meet without violating the Kansas Open Meetings Act. So, and to share ideas, to, banter ideas back and forth. So in hindsight, now looking back, I think it's good, and it's less pressure on the board.
Thank you. Erin, it's your turn, I believe, the next question.
What is one area of the county services you feel like needs maybe some additional resources at this time?
Okay, Mr. Duncan.
Oh, well, always roads and bridges. In my time, I'm serving on the board. We were fortunate at that time to have resources to improve our roads, to repair a lot of bridges, rebuild a lot of bridges, pave a section, I believe, of East Waterwell Road, I think almost a 2-mile section, and also do some work on North Ohio. But we never had enough money. We also had a big gravel pile. We have 12 road grader districts, because people never asked me about the road graders. But we never had enough money at that time. And now with cost of things going up and insurance costs, there's never enough tax dollars to go around. So that is something that probably, especially in rainy years, you need more money for improvements on the roads and washouts and things like that.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Mr. Sparks.
The road and bridge is still one of the major things, but with a lot of other things, I was really hard to believe when I became a commissioner of how far outdated our communication systems that we had in this county that got along with all the public services, the sheriffs, the city police, the highway patrol, and nobody could talk, the real fire districts. If you was out, and that was when that first fire started way out in western Kansas and all over where, I'm thinking if that happened here, one of those fire trucks was out in the middle of a pasture, that is in the plans, we got it going. It will happen coming up down the road. Road and bridge, we was lucky enough, things have been going good in this Saline County. We added another mill levy to the thing. Even with prior commissioners taking away mill levies, we had a mill levy just for the road department. So the road and bridge department, I feel, is being funded, and with all the flooding we had last year, we had a lot of things going, and the road and bridges is getting funded very well. Thank you.
Thank you. Time for our next question from Mr. Kirkwood.
I would kind of like to bounce off of Erin's question here and say that, politicians, county commissioners, whatever, we would all like to see improvements made, but sometimes those improvements aren't made because it's taking a lot of resources just to maintain it as is. So in the event that you guys do see a definite need to make improvements and do funnel money into those improvements, what are your top 3 issues that you would subtract the budget from in order to make those decisions?
Well, first, one of the first things that's just happened, I actually have lived on South Holmes Road for 43 years. We just had to close the road down because we had a culvert go out. It washed away, and the neighbors started calling, and I just said, hey, look, we've ordered the part to go in there. We had to put a blade there. We've got things going, and the funds are there to take care of these items right now. We're working on West Waterwell Road, miles southwest of Burma. Keeps going, but I think the funding that we need to do is funding with the mental health along with the sheriff's office to help fund things that need to be done with the addiction and stuff that's going on in this environment. Yep.
Okay, top three. Well, certainly roads, road improvements, bridges and bridge repairs, because we have miles and miles of roads throughout the county. And our rural fire departments, I think, are usually in pretty good shape. We have pretty good funding for those. And a project that started before I left, and then the two commissioners that were still on with the expanded commission after I left, and a project we started was at the road and bridge department itself. That was really dilapidated. We had roof improvements and improvements to the shop buildings. Some of that got done, but I don't know if all of that got done. But, I'd have to look at that and kind of be brought up to date since I left almost 5 years ago.
You think we need one more question from, if you have one more, Mr. Anders?
Sure do. Do you plan to promote any tax changes? Why or why not?
Oh, and it's Mr. Duncan's
I'd
turn.
have to look at the budget and really dig into that with the current commission. Again, I would be one of 5. That's a real difference, just coming on board with the new commission, and the new commission I would be part of, and would have to be looking at the current budget and the plans for the new budget. So I don't know at this time. I really can't answer that.
I look at it as that it's one of the things that we're able to do is not have a mill levy, and I don't see a tax increase at all, except the only thing is that don't know where it's at, if the new jail will actually be going on the November ballot. So that's one of the things that we're still talking about. Other than that, Saline County is very fortunate to be having an industrial component to its structure that we have as far as tax base. A lot of counties are really in bad shape, and I feel that Saline County has a lot of great people, heads of those offices, that are doing such a great job with their budget. We've had a good turn on this year of maintaining a controlled budget, so it's worked out very well. I'm just happy with everything that's going on.
Okay, thank you, and thanks for the media panel. We're now going to go to Ann Zimmerman and questions from the audience, wherever they may be.
You're coming right now. Just a minute, please. Okay, who's the first, whose turn is it? Is it,
I think it's fine, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, would you support changing the Saline County Commission elections from partisan to nonpartisan, or not, and why, or why not?
Nope. Well, and it's like, first off, I'm just going to go, I would have to study that a little bit, the difference between a partisan and bipartisan avenue. I really haven't thought about that and studied it, so I couldn't quite answer that one. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Duncan.
And no, I would not. I really like it the way it is right now, and that people can seek their party's nomination. In my case, and Rodger's case, we're seeking our party's nomination, and I like the process the way it is right now. No.
Thank you. Mr. Duncan, you'll be first on this one. I believe this comes from a member of the County Board of Health and asks, would you support reestablishing a joint city-county health department with an advisory board with powers similar to what existed a decade ago?
No, I would not. And I was involved in the process when we helped establish the Saline County Health Department, and I think it's working well the way it is right now.
Thank you. Mr. Sparks?
And I would have to ditto to that because I come on board right after that was done, and in working with the health department the way it is right now, not knowing before what part of the city and what's going on now with that there, I got to say that I feel that it's worked out very well, that it's handling very well.
Thank you. Mr. Duncan, right? Would you support, oh no, this would be Mr. Sparks.
okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Would you support moving the county commission meeting time to early evening so that more people could participate in both the meetings and in the opportunity to serve as a commissioner?
To me, it's like I think that's been tried before in the past, and I don't believe that any more people showed up at those meetings that there. Even back when they had it 3 days a week, I don't think there was much of it. Other people showed up. I am not in favor of an early evening deal, and no, I would not support that.
Okay, Mr. Duncan?
I would agree with Commissioner Sparks. No, I would not, and that's not support evening meetings. And let me add on to that to kind of help explain that. That it also affects your staff who are there, during working hours during the day. And we did make an effort when I served previously in my 8 years. If we had really big controversial issues, we would sometimes do an additional evening meeting occasionally. So we do that, but I think the system works well the way it is right now.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Mr. Duncan. You both identified the jail as one of the major issues facing the county. Excuse me. How do you relate to the upcoming jail expansion project, and do you think Saline County needs to change course in order to reduce its jail population?
And is my turn?
Mr. Duncan. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And for keeping track of this.
Barely.
Okay, well, I think we definitely need a remodel and expansion of the jail. The problem I had previously was the Cadillac plan, too much for too long. So I think we need some type of funding mechanism. If it's a sales tax, maybe a smaller tax for a shorter period of time. But we don't need the Cadillac plan. We need the people to vote on it, and we need an improvement. We also need to find a way to let nonviolent offenders out of jail that don't need to be there. If we can get more people out of jail, we don't need as large of a plan. So find a way to get the nonviolent offenders out of jail. We don't need people in jail for years and years or months and months. That's my thought.
Thank you. Mr. Sparks?
We have to have a new jail. I mean, it's going to be cheaper in the long run to build a new jail. I mean, at the committee meetings that they had the people there, I feel that the one thing that we have to do, the jail population has changed dramatically over the last few years. I mean, we have a whole lot more women in the population. You have to be a completely different. Even the men, the people that are in there for different reasons now. I feel that we have to have programs associated with being in jail to help them get out when they are out, that they have another reason to get out. I feel that having been said, that I think that we have to have a whole lot of mental health here coming down the road. Yep.
Thank you. A few years ago, just a minute, let me make sure I know what I'm saying here. Okay, so Mr. Sparks, you're first. A few years ago, the Board of County Commissioners authorized a salary survey. The result indicated that practically all but the 5-member board voted to cut the mill levy. Would you vote for regular surveys and to follow their recommendations?
No, I would not, because one of the things was that did happen when that survey was done and coming in after the fact, is that that survey was done, but it didn't take into effect any of the benefit packages at all that the county had or anything like that. It was purely based on an hourly survey that they did, and it was just not a true to life situation. I think that a lot of people, it's like me, I just think a lot of people, if they look at it and say, okay, hey, I can go to work for here for X amount of dollars, but once I'm done, and in 5 years, I can be here, and you have step levels that people talk about this survey, and it goes, it's not a bad deal. I think the problem with it is that the whole Saline County has a job problem that nobody can find employees. That's, to me, that's one of our biggest things. We got to get people to move to Salina, Kansas.
Thank you. Mr. Duncan?
Can you clarify the question again? What was the
The Board of Commissioners authorized a salary survey. The results indicated that practically all of the county employees, except the board members, would have voted to cut the mill levy. And the rest of the question is, would you vote for regular surveys and to follow their recommendations?
Well, when I was on in my years, I believe we did at least one survey. I'm trying to remember. I think we did. I'm sure we did in my 8 years. And let me expand on that just a little bit. What I thought was wrong as part of the survey, and I expressed that when I was on the commission with the current county administrator at the time and the head of HR, that it was weird. What was odd on the survey was that you had elected officials, the longer they were on, like the previous sheriff and some others, that their salaries started at a base and then they were like long-term employees. They got a higher and higher salary. And I thought that the elected officials this is their salary. If they get elected and year one was the same as they were on 12 years. Anyway, it was all messed up. So that was something I'd probably have to look at if I got back on.
Thank you. Time's up. All right.
Sorry.
This is the last, I think this is the time for the last question. What should the county do to improve the situation with COVID-19? Are you in favor of the governor's policies? And can you expound on your opinion about dealing with COVID-19? That would be Randy Duncan.
Well, it's a major problem that we as a county, as a state, and a nation need to get our arms around. The biggest thing that we need to get to is a vaccine. We're in the vaccine trials right now, and it seems like the biggest way, or the biggest thing that we need to get on and find, and it looks like the trials will be successful, and then it's the mass manufacture of a vaccine. So that's something that we as a county need to do, and that's something that the CDC is working on right now. So it's a major issue. It's affecting all of us, not only as a nation, but as a county.
Thank you. Mr. Sparks.
Yes, and I know when this come up that I had quite a few plus minuses, people contacting me about why did I vote this way, and I voted when the first county that afternoon at 1 o'clock or 3 o'clock, whenever the governor put out the message that, oh, we have to wear masks, okay? We had that special meeting that afternoon, and we did vote. First off, we voted, no, we're not going to go with that. We're not going to mandate you wear the mask. And the reason is because our statute that we passed, it says individuals are highly encouraged to make responsible individual choices about wearing cloth face coverings. Use of cloth coverings will not be legally mandated within Saline County. We was for it, but we wanted you to make that decision. We wanted businesses to also have that choice of determining whether you had the deal. I was not in favor of mandated, still am not. But the thing is that, and then the things we haven't, thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
And can I just say, I do agree with Commissioner Sparks' vote on that. I would have voted as you voted.
Thank you.
We are ready for you, Abner.
Yeah, we are ready for wrap-up comments, and you have 1 minute and each, and Mr. Sparks will be first, and let the wrap-up begin. You can say anything you would like about
Is it
the
1 minute or
subject.
2 minutes?
Just
Okay.
1 minute.
Okay.
That's all we're doing today.
I want to first thank all of you here for attending and having us be here, because this has been pretty eye-awakening again. And I want to thank everyone who supported and voted for me in 2016 to represent them as a commissioner in District 3. You know, and on this COVID-19, I hope that all of you take responsibility for what you do. And I've been out to places that are still not wearing their masks. They still do not go out. In places that say you have to have a mask on, they take them off. But also appreciate your vote on August 4th, excuse me. Thank you.
Mr. Duncan.
Okay, again, thank you for having us here tonight. It's been a pleasure being here at this forum. I think, as you can tell, there's not a lot of differences between Rodger and I. Rodger and I are friends, and Rodger has served with me in the Republican Party these many years, and he did a great job for me, and we worked well together. There's a lot of similarities between Commissioner Sparks and myself. I've often said that county government is closest to the people. It's closest to the people because as we are out in our county, we see all of you at the grocery store and throughout our community at the local gas station and wherever, and that's where we see all of you, and that's where you talk to us about the issues that concern you. I enjoyed my time on the county commission, and I think I would enjoy serving again if the voters of the 3rd District decide to vote for me in the primary election. Thank you again.
Thank you to the candidates. We appreciate you being here, your willingness to participate. We remind everybody that they need to go out and vote on or before August the 4th. We are going to take about a 10-minute break. We will sanitize the tables to prepare for the state legislative candidates who are up next. Thank you so much.
Hello, I'm Abner Perney, immediate past president of the Salina League of Women Voters. This is section 3 of our forum for the primary elections coming up August 4th. Today's forum is sponsored by the Salina League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization of women and men of every age, race, background, and political belief. There are more than 1,200 local leagues, state leagues, and the national organization. League members work to promote citizen action on local, state, and national issues. The League as an organization does not support any particular candidates. Our goal for today's forum is to provide the Salina area voters with information about candidates in the contested races on the ballots for the primary election, which is August 4th. Voters may vote by mail or vote in advance at the office of the county clerk, which is room 215 of the City County Building, 300 West Ash in Salina. We thank the Salina Area Chamber of Commerce for the use of this visitors annex. Visit Salina Annex is the correct name. We also thank Salina Media Connection and Smoky Hills Public Television for being here to video this event. This segment is a little bit different in that we are combining all 3 legislative offices that are up for election in our area. The Kansas House of Representatives, District number 69, which does have 2 candidates on the Democrat side, it's the only race like that we have this year, those being Dr. Phil Black, my immediate right, and Ryan Holmquist, next man over. Then we also have a race in the Republican side of the primary for the representative district number 71. Diana Dirk'S is here, and she is the incumbent. Next person down to the right. She is running against her is Stephen Howe, who was invited to participate but declined our invitation. And then we also are all in Senate District 24. Randall Hardy is here, he is the incumbent. J.R. Clays was unable to participate, declined our invitation, and he will be on the ballot opposite Randall Hardy. Since these are all legislative positions, they all have to ultimately deal with the same issues, so the same set of questions applies to everyone, and that's why we're proceeding with this forum. Ann Zimmerman, our Vice President, is up next.
Thank you, Abner. It's my job to go over the rules. We have 1 minute opening remarks to start with by each candidate. We will then alternate the order of the candidates answering questions. We will start with questions from the media panel, and then we will ask questions that come from the audience. We hope you are seeing on your screen an email address and a cell phone number. You can either text a question for us to ask to the candidates or send us an email with a question. We hope you are participating that way. We have had some good participation earlier this evening in the other races. The questions must pertain to all the candidates. You can't aim a question at any particular candidate. They need to be questions we can ask to all 4 candidates. The candidates will have 1 minute to answer each question, and then we will have 1 minute closing remarks by the candidates. I will say that we have timers over here, League of Women Voters members and family members, to keep time. They have cards. The green card says it's good to go. The yellow card this time is saying that 20 seconds is remaining, and the pink card says to stop. So please make note of the timers. It's my job to moderate the 1 minute opening remarks. So we're going to start at the left end of the table. So Mr. Hardy, please start. Randall Hardy.
Thank you. My name is Randall Hardy, and I am State Senator for the 24th District, which includes Saline County and the northern half of Dickinson County. I have been a Salina resident for 40 years. During that time, I was the president of a local business and served on various city boards and commissions for over 30 years. I served on the Salina City Commission from 2013 to 2016 and was elected to the Kansas Senate in 2016. In the Senate, I was successful in helping to restore fairness to Kansas tax policy. I voted for the first education funding bill in 20 years that was deemed constitutional, and I helped bring fiscal responsibility and stability back to the state. I also voted for the Eisenhower Legacy Highway Plan. I sponsored bills that directly helped our district. My goal in the Senate is to listen to voters and support legislation that helps our district and all Kansans. Thank you.
Thank you. Diana Dirk'S.
Thank you. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for putting this on this evening. I think it's just wonderful that you're able to visit with us, even though we're wearing some different gear than what we normally do. This will be my 3rd term as a representative. I think one of the things that comes focused to me that was the most important thing that happened to me during this whole process was being approached by General Taffanelli in securing a tuition assistance program for the National Guard and the Air National Guard. So I went forward, wrote a bill, was able to get it passed, and so therefore now the National Guard and the Kansas Air National Guard are able to get a tuition, 100% tuition assistance program, which is also a good recruiting subject for those. It helps bring them in. Another thing is that I've been working on several committees. I'm not on the tax committee, so watch the tax questions, but agriculture.
Thank you. Ryan Holmquist is next in line.
Good evening, and thanks to the League of Women Voters for hosting this event tonight. My name is Ryan Holmquist. I am a farmer and rancher. I'm a fifth-generation Kansan. My family's been on their original homestead for 152 years, operating that land, and I am a graduate of Bethany College and KU, and have been the choir teacher at Central High School for the last 13 years. I am running because working families struggle paycheck to paycheck, and for too long they have been just barely getting by, while the wealthy and multinational corporations get tax breaks and cuts. And I feel like we need to prioritize issues for working families, such as eliminating the food sales tax, getting health care for people who can't afford it, reducing costs of child care so that people in this community can get a fair shake. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Phil Black.
When I moved here 18 years ago, I made a commitment to the city of Salina. I've done everything from being involved in the successful school bond issue, to bike lanes, to documenting the stories of veterans who served in World War II. At the state legislature, I testified on a number of things, including community access television. I also served as a lobbyist for two different organizations, including, strangely enough, the NAACP, where I was secretary, and had the honor of introducing the great late Buck O'Neill. I have a master's degree in political science. I have a doctorate in education leadership. I was a nine-year veteran of Brown Mackie College, and I was an Eagle Scout. That's important because that's where I learned that democracy is not a one-off, it is a lifetime commitment. I'm Phil Black. If you'll allow me, I would like to make my commitment to the city of Salina by serving as your state representative. Thank you.
This is a time now that we're going to have a few questions from our local media. We'll start this round with Mr. Paul Kirkwood asking questions on behalf of Salina Media Connection, and then we'll alternate with Erin Anders of the Salina Journal in the questioning. We're going to start the first round of questioning with Diana Dirk'S, and we're going to come this direction, circulating around the table, and we're going to try to keep repeating that as the evening goes on. So first question, Mr. Kirkwood, for the entire panel, starting with Diana Dirk'S.
All right, can everyone hear me okay? All right, I just want to thank you all for being here and for dedicating a good portion of your lives to public service and to the people of Salina and the surrounding area. My first question is, well, as you know, Kansas is among the 14 states that have yet to adopt Medicaid expansion, a Medicaid expansion bill under the provisions of the Affordable Care Act. Do you support Medicaid expansion in Kansas? Why or why not?
That is an easy one. I have been supporting the effort for the Medicaid expansion, so I began my career as a House of Representatives, and every time we try, it gets knocked down. If you really look at the problems that we're having right now with the virus, and thinking of the people who perhaps do not have insurance, Medicaid expansion would have been first and foremost. We really came close this last session. I thought we had it, but we lost it by 2 votes. Then I will continue in my efforts until we get Medicaid expansion passed. That is what I work on every single year. Thank you.
Mr. Holmquist.
Medicaid expansion is incredibly popular, and the House, I believe, has passed it twice. And it seems like the will of the state for this to get passed. Of course, I strongly support it. We have to get the young, low-income workers and families, people who are working more than one job and still trying to provide and can't seem to afford health insurance. We have got to expand this on their behalf. And a vote for me is a vote to replace a no vote on Medicaid expansion.
Thank you. Dr. Black.
My district has the highest level of poverty. It has the highest number of people in rental income, the highest number of single parents, highest number of people who speak English as a second language. And as a result, we also have the highest number of people who are uninsured. And the problem is, it moves beyond an economic, ideological sense to when we have the COVID-19. That means those people who can't get to health care with that virus expose all of us to it. So we got to get beyond this whole crazy ideological thing that's going on and start treating this with a science-based attitude. Because if the weak link in our district, which is the people without insurance, that weak link is going to be as strong as we're going to get as this virus becomes more and more contagious. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Hardy.
Thank you. I have supported Medicaid expansion every year that I've been in the Senate. Starting in 2017 was my first vote. I think Medicaid expansion is very important to our district for one important reason. Well, actually a couple reasons. The first is that it provides medical care options for people who cannot currently afford a policy on the ACA. And so they use the emergency rooms as their primary care physicians, which is the most expensive and least efficient way to provide medical care. And also I believe that medical providers and doctors should be reimbursed for their services, and currently they are not. Abilene Hospital and Memorial Hospital wrote off $800,000 in claims in 2018, which could have been paid for by Medicaid expansion.
Okay, that completes the first question round. Erin Anders will present a question, and Ryan Holmquist will be first to answer.
Okay. What do you believe Kansans are concerned about, and how will you address those concerns?
I've been knocking an awful lot of doors in the last month, and the issues that seem to be on people's minds have to do with getting back to work safely or how they can reclaim a lost job. The food sales tax is a big issue for a lot of people, I'm finding. I'm finding that when I'm talking about getting health care for people who can't afford it, I'm seeing a lot of nods and say, oh yeah, let me tell you about my copay, or oh yeah, let me tell you what happened at the doctor's office. And I think to solve those three things, one, there's a proposal by a state rep from Newton, Tim Hodge, in which would provide a 20% tax credit for businesses, churches, schools, nonprofits who hire people or give those people raises on to take care of payroll expenses up to $5,000. I think we just got to eliminate the food sales tax and get some taxes going on a 2% tax on wealthy or multinational corporations and get people health care that can't afford it, Medicaid expansion.
Thank you. Mr. Phil Black, doctor.
I haven't been going door to door because I think in this virus that's not putting politics ahead of people's health. So I have not been doing that. But I do know from talking to folks over the phone and just reading the paper all the time, there's a great deal of uncertainty due to all sorts of things going on. To sit there and pin it on one tax or some other specific idea is not thinking in the big picture. We have a very uncertain future in just about every area you think of. So the best thing we can do is send someone to the state government who can think these things through and can negotiate the craziness of the state capitol. Because we don't know at this point what even our schools are going to be like, much less whether we should pass this tax or that.
Thank you, Dr. Black. Senator Hardy.
I think that one of the big issues in our region is the availability of quality jobs, and I'm working very hard every year to make that possible, and we're finally getting to the point where I think that we're going to have some big possibilities ahead of us in the district to look forward to. I also know that property tax is a big issue with a lot of folks, including me. I would like to see a property tax either lowered or to at least keep the increase of property tax at a manageable level so that people are not priced out of the market and are forced to stay in a certain income level when they have the ability to do better.
Thank you. Representative Dirk'S.
Thank you. I have been going door to door. I leave my flyer on the door, ring the doorbell, and then jump 6 feet back so that I'm within the safe distance and visit with folks. That way I do wear a mask. And a lot of times it's really hot, but they still want to stand out there and ask. Most of them are really fearful now with what's going on, that they're not there. A lot of their family members are losing their jobs, they're having to move back home. They're concerned about what our future holds, and I think anything that we can do to take that burden off of their shoulders as quickly as we can, as soon as session starts. And I think even an emergency session, which should have been called a long time ago, to see how we could, because this is something that you've never even heard of. I mean, this is back, okay, thank you. Oh, I still have 10 seconds, my gosh. I really feel that we need to get right on this and see. I've always been for food sales tax to be exempt.
Okay, thank you. That completes the round of questioning. And now it's Paul Kirkwood's time to pose the next question, and Dr. Phil Black will be the first to respond.
Your memory is superb, sir.
Thank
you. The governor's stay-at-home orders during the initial COVID-19 outbreak in Kansas sparked a debate about the role of government in working to ensure the public's health. Were the state government's actions to prevent the spread of COVID-19 justified? And what role do you believe the state should be taking in addressing this pandemic?
It's a great question. First of all, I agree with the governor. It was science-based. I think we need to continue with that. She's not doing this on her own. She's relying on the science of the doctor who's the head of the program there. The state has a role of oversight. It also has the role of the budget, and it can pass laws. For instance, they passed a law limiting our mill levies here locally, which I think was a huge mistake, because we may need to be able to adjust our mill levy to solve our problems locally. One thing that's come out of the government has been the fact that we need to respect the local needs. Johnson County is different from us, is different from Ulysses. So we need to have the flexibility under home rule to be able to do what we need to do locally, but at the same time, the state can provide guidelines, oversight, and to some extent, budget.
Senator Hardy.
Thank you. When Governor Kelly first addressed the COVID virus and basically locked down the economy in Kansas, it was a harsh measure, but given what we knew about the COVID virus, and especially what we did not know how much we needed to shut the economy down to keep people safe. And now we do know more than we knew back in March, and I think that perhaps the measure was, even though it was probably too harsh, it kept people healthy. I think that from now on, the ability of the local units of government to decide what is safe for each of those units is the way to go. And I think in most things that home rule is the rule that we should follow when establishing policy.
Representative Diana Dirk'S.
Thank you. I probably follow along the same lines as Senator Hardy. I really feel that local rule, because every agency, every local government has their own agenda, and that's why we put them in office, so that we can keep track of how it's going to affect Salina and the community that we live in. Making everybody wear a mask, I think was a good idea. I don't like wearing them. I can't breathe. But yet, if we can stop that in its tracks, and what it looks like right now, because it keeps increasing, then I think we really need to keep an eye on it and make sure that we have the right measures in place, that it's going to keep our people safe. And it does cost some money, but I think at some time, what is money worth if it's worth a life? And I think in that case, that's very true. We need to protect our people.
I think the lockdown order may have seemed heavy-handed, but it's something that every governor in the nation did at one point or another. I think that Governor Kelly did a better thing this time with the executive order on mask mandates because it allowed for cities and counties to opt in or opt out, and I think that Saline County and the Salina City Commission made their decision, made the right decision, and I also think that compliance is always difficult in a place like the United States, but I think that shaming people over those things is not always the answer. I think asking them to wear a mask, and I also know the state has just received a shipment of 8 million masks, and I think it would be a great thing to ask them to wear one as they are being handed one provided by the state and distributed across every county.
Okay, thank you very much for this round. And it's back to the Salina Journal. Mr. Erin Anders has questions, starting with Senator Hardy this round.
Thank you. Kansas schools have had an increased need in trying to find quality teachers to fill vacant positions in our education system. How could the state of Kansas support current students who are pursuing a degree in education, or how can we promote teachers to come to Kansas?
Coming from a business background, I would think that the best way to be able to attract talent to come to Kansas and teach would be to be competitive with pay, and that is that's something that is a constant struggle. But I think that it's the one that ultimately will make the difference in Kansas, no matter if it's in the high school level or pre-K or wherever. I like that approach.
Diana Dirk'S.
Thank you. It's in our Constitution that we must fund our schools. We need to also ensure that the kids never again have to sleep in offices, those that were foster kids, because of lack of funding. I think we need to take care of the people who live here, provide them a quality education, make sure that we retain our teachers by being able to give them adequate pay, or else they'll probably go somewhere else. I think we have a great set of instructionists here already, and we hope to keep them that way. And our kids have a great value in that, and it starts at home, goes to the school, and we should appreciate the teachers that we have here and make sure that they're paid adequately.
Mr. Holmquist.
As a teacher, I'm pretty familiar with the process of becoming a teacher and current processes with KSDE, the Kansas State Department of Education. I know that KSDE has put up some serious roadblocks for people to become teachers. There are endless tests and hoops to jump through. I think that there are some things that KSDE can do a little bit differently to help make it a little bit easier for somebody to become a teacher. And we also have to make sure we don't turn to Brownback 2.0 and cut funding from schools and do all the mistakes that we have been made over the past decade, because that was one way we started losing teachers in the state. And I think adequately funding schools plus providing for better teacher salaries is one way to keep teachers here and to get them here.
Thank you.
One of the reasons why we have all these regulations is because there's a general public distrust, I think, of public education, which is unfortunate. But every now and then you'll hear somebody say, well, you need to take somebody who's been in the business world and put them in the classroom. I tell you what, you take somebody from the business community and put them in an 8th grade class, and I would pay to sit there and watch that, because they won't last at all. What we need to do is to make sure that first of all, that teachers have full due process. I want to go back to allowing teachers to organize and to allow them to have their pay taken, their dues taken out of their pay. They should be able to organize, as should all public employees, because they're all valuable to us. And that's part of a philosophy that says, starve the government and let private enterprise come in. Well, going back to that guy in the classroom, that's what happens.
And that completes that round on that question. We're now back to Mr. Kirkwood of Salina Media Group. I always say it wrong. Sorry.
All right. What's your view on the state of racial equality in relation to policing practices and the criminal justice system in Kansas? And what changes, if any, would you support?
Who starts?
Diana Dirk'S.
I believe that we should support our community, our first responders. I even send out a card on that. Yes, you do have some incidences. You know, it doesn't always happen in rural Kansas. It's usually in the bigger cities. I was born and raised in Los Angeles. I wouldn't want to move back there right now, to be real honest with you. I feel very safe here at home. But we do need to make sure that they are adequately paid. They are out there saving lives. They are there when we need them. Fire department, first responders, and that also includes the military. So I'm a true advocate for trying to keep them here as much as we can, because we do need them in our community.
Ryan Holmquist, please.
First, let's be clear that Black Lives Matter. We must support racial minorities targeted by law enforcement, root out racism wherever it exists, and we also must get law enforcement better training. But we also have to keep in mind that years of brown back cuts, police have had to do so much more, serve as mental health professionals, and they are oftentimes put in situations where they are undermanned and equipped. We need to provide the necessary resources for our law enforcement. I believe that we can hold our law enforcement in high regard at the same time that we can also hold them to a high standard. And I believe that we should have meaningful discussions, which I think that the community has begun some of those, and we should also provide the necessary resources to make sure that we have a safe and a good community.
Thank you. Dr. Black.
Before we could talk about that, we need to understand what we're talking about with white privilege. My family came here 400 years ago on the Mayflower. John Alden on my mom's side and Stephen Hopkins on my dad's side. But 1 year before that, slaves arrived. And because of the slavery, there are people in my district who cannot trace their ancestry back to when they arrived in America. The fact that two white men can sit here and talk on and on with great detail about how long our family has been here is itself a privilege. But privilege isn't character. And if we continue to do it knowing full well that we are either ignoring what people have been through, like the displacement of the native people, or we just don't know about it, then that to me is white privilege. And that falls into the, well, I didn't mean it that way category. So before we can talk about all this, we need to recognize what we have done to create this problem to begin with.
Senator Hardy.
I think that race relations definitely needs to be addressed. We have a big issue all over the country, and Salina and Saline County are not exempt from that. We need to, I think, a two-pronged approach. Every single one of us in this room and watching this presentation needs to think differently about our neighbors, and our neighbors would include anyone in the city of Salina, to think differently about relationships. I also think, I was on the city commission in Salina when we purchased body cameras for the police, and it was Captain Brad Nelson's suggestion, and I'm glad we did that. And he has set the bar very high in terms of professionalism in training, and I think that among those things that we're setting a good example in Salina on how to deal with race relations.
Okay, our next question will begin the answering with Ryan Holmquist, and it's Mr. Anders' turn for questioning.
Okay. The media industry has changed tremendously in the last 20 years to keep up with the latest technologies. The use of technology has expanded a great deal in education and in the workforce since the coronavirus outbreak. How is our government using technology currently, and is there a way that our elected officials can use technology to make our government run more efficiently?
There was the special session in May, and it was, I believe, for the first time broadcast on YouTube. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but there was the House and Senate, and they broadcast committee meetings, and that is a level of transparency that I have not personally seen before. I've spent years listening to the audio recordings on kslegislature.org, but YouTube provides a much better, bigger, wider experience, and I think that's really important for the transparency in our government. With regard to schools, well, first, back up. I think that if the pandemic continues, I think that we have to do some things utilizing technology like Zoom or YouTube when it comes to agency meetings, governmental meetings, things like that. Schools have been doing a fantastic job. I'm an employee at USD 305, and they have done amazing things over the course of last spring very, very quickly in order to respond to at-home online learning. And I know that from a meeting I was at last...
Thank you. Dr. Black.
Isn't it ironic? I think I'm the only one up here using an iPad. Well, here's the thing. I've been involved in online education in one form or another since 1993. And what you need to understand is that really it's the difference between live and not live. So in a live environment, it can be like this. It can also be over Zoom. It could be on the telephone. A not live environment is where it's asynchronous. The student is given homework. They do the homework, they come back. It's the same thing in the online world. So that's the first misunderstanding that I've seen over and over again. Those can be put together either in some combination or as a whole. And while the state should provide guidance in this, I think we need to let the teachers do what they know how to do best. And I know I learned from other teachers, and I'm sure others have learned from me. So let's let the teacher loose, give them the resources, give us the patience to do it, and they'll do fine.
Senator Hardy.
One area that comes to mind immediately for me is when we came to this point of dealing with COVID, we had a massive unemployment problem on our hands, and it made it painfully clear to legislators that our computers that were processing unemployment claims and the Department of Labor were woefully inadequate. They ran COBOL, and you know, these people don't even know how to deal with that anymore. And so it's something that needs to be addressed in every agency in Topeka to make sure that we have resources to communicate effectively with people in the state and know how to solve problems in an efficient manner.
Diana Dirk'S.
It just makes for more availability with people. I mean, instantaneously you can text someone on a phone and have them right there, and you can watch them. I started out as a key punch operator, and you know, the great big files, and now you have something I can carry in my purse. But you know, and I have to admit, I'm still learning some of this technology. But I think by having the technology, we've been able to continue to educate our kids safely. They can stay at home, do their homework. I know it's not something that parents probably want forever, but you know, the kids would want to be able to socialize once again, and hopefully that'll happen soon. But I think it's probably saved a lot of lives by not having close proximity to someone who may be having the virus itself. And it's something that's not going to go away, unfortunately, for a while. So I think we're going to be in for a long haul. But at least it keeps people communicating with each other. They're not stranded out in the middle of nowhere with no one to talk to. They can still communicate, still have some source of...
Thank you. We originally planned this for 6 candidates, and it's not worked that way. So do we still have questions available? Yes, we do. Okay, Paul Kirkwood's got another question for us from Salina Media Connection. And Phil Black's first on the response.
All right, so I'm going to sidetrack away from COVID just for a moment.
How can you do that with these things on? I keep doing that.
Do you support the legalization of marijuana in this state to any degree or in any capacity? Why or why not?
You know, it's interesting that the Republicans they're easy on letting the economy take place over health concerns. So if that's true, why don't you just legalize marijuana? I don't get what the problem is. If that's how you are, if you think the economy is more important, then just legalize it. Colorado made $300 million last year in 2019, and we're going to see shortfalls coming up. So I guess from my viewpoint, there are all sorts of problems with legalizing marijuana, but we have 3 states around it that have it legalized in one form or another. I say let's just roll the dice and legalize it completely. Make it recreationally legal, get the tax money, help to get us back to normal, and we'll just have to deal with the problems as we go.
Senator Hardy.
When I was knocking on doors in 2016 in Solomon, there was a young family that was living in a home, and so I asked her what's important to her, and she said, you know, I wish we had medical marijuana, or at least access to medical marijuana. And I said, well, go ahead, explain that. And she said, well, we have an 11-year-old son who has seizures. And the only thing we found so far, and just recently, is that medical marijuana will calm those seizures, and he can live a somewhat normal life. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, every year, every chance I have, from now on, I'm going to vote to in favor of medical marijuana. And I think that's something that if it helps the people of the district with their medical issues, I'm for it. I don't even have to think about it.
Representative Dierks.
Well, it'll be a duplicate answer, but that would be my reply as well. I feel that it's important that they continue with medical marijuana because there are a lot of people out there who have those seizures, that they can make them feel more comfortable. As far as just making it legal altogether, the only drawback that I would have with that is where would that lead them on? You know, you start out with marijuana, then might be on something else. We do have a drug problem clear across the U.S., and I would hate to see that here in Kansas. So I think if anything would ever be done, it would certainly have to be only after scrutiny, depending on what kind of thing is going to happen in our communities, you know, what our kids are going to be getting themselves into. There's a safety measure there, but for medical marijuana, I think it would be very important that we have that because it is being used and would help people feel a lot better, and maybe even, you know, like that young man. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and finishing up with Ryan Holmquist.
I definitely support legalizing medicinal marijuana. We know that it helps a lot with, especially with veterans with PTSD, cancer, leukemia, seizures, as Senator Hardy said. I strongly support those, of course, with some safety measures and make sure we get things in place at the state level and local level so that we prevent minors from accessing such substances. But it will raise revenue and for the state in an uncertain time. And also, I would add to that, let's get some people out of jails who are low-level drug offenders so that we have room for the people who need to be there.
Thank you for these responses, and thanks for the question. It's interesting to see we have 3 medical for sure, and 1, let's do whatever can be done and keep it under control. And I'm not supposed to be commenting on the comments. I'm sorry. I'm not going to do it again. And it's Mr. Anders' time to pose another question. And now I've forgotten who starts.
Was it back that marijuana? The guy getting 23 off?
I think it's lack of caffeine, at least. At any rate, where are we? We're back to Mr. Holmquist.
They're pointing. They've got it.
They've got it. It is Senator Hardy takes this question from Mr. Anders.
In light of the raising unemployment rate, what is your economic plan to attract or grow business within the state of Kansas?
Senator Hardy.
Just starting in 2018 actually, the state has beefed up Department of Commerce, and it has now opened offices in Mexico and China to attract business to Kansas specifically. And I do know there are projects in the wings that are considering Kansas because we have a lot going for us. We take a lot of things for granted that other states don't have. And so it's, we're at the crossroads of the country. I-70 and 135, that makes a big deal. That's a big deal to a lot of people. And so I think we can sell the state, and we don't even have to sell ourselves to offer, huge incentives to companies to come to Kansas. They're starting to see the benefits of coming to Kansas without that.
Thank you. Diana Dirk'S.
I think we should also be looking out for entrepreneurs, new upstart businesses. I think the day of the big malls, and we could see what's happening right here in Salina, which is just horrible to see. But you just have vacant spaces, and then take those vacant spaces and make them. A lot of people have said that maybe they could do something with the senior population in that area, so they don't have to go out in the cold winter months. But I feel that just keeping in contact and watching out for the people. We have so many young folks out there that are true inventors and coming up with ideas for businesses that would fit just perfectly in surroundings such as Salina and in Kansas. So I truly feel we must really work at that and explore whatever avenues that we can to bring them on board, so to say.
Ryan.
I think there are some tax credits you can offer that other states offer for entrepreneurial, especially small tech businesses, small startups, things like that are really attractive to people in their 20s and 30s, people just getting started. As I mentioned earlier, a proposal to provide a payroll tax break, 20% tax break for people in schools, businesses, churches, nonprofits, in order to raise wages or to expand their workforce. I think legalizing sports betting, legalizing medicinal marijuana are all things that can be economic drivers. And good schools. Good schools are oftentimes the economic drivers of many communities in this state.
Schools and hospitals.
Phil Black.
Are you guys serious? I mean, we're supposed to be following science here, right? The science says this COVID could go around the planet another 2 times. We don't have any idea what we're expecting, and here we are talking about trying to attract jobs to Kansas. We should be figuring out how we're going to survive in Kansas. How are the people in my district going to have health care? How are we going to prevent them from us contracting what they get? Those are the questions we should be asking. I'm sorry, I would love to attract business to Kansas. I love Kansas. I think it's a wonderful place. But that's just the wrong question. We've got to start with a different set of assumptions. We need to somehow bend and not break in this crisis. That's my answer.
And that completes the media portion of the questions. We have questions from real voters in the audience coming, and Ann's going to present those.
Thank you. Abner? We have quite a few questions. I think there may be more coming up, maybe. Okay. So this time we start with Diana?
Yep.
Okay. In today's polarized political climate, how do you reach across the aisle and garner bipartisan support for issues that benefit most Kansans, and how do you go beyond party politics and work for Medicaid expansion in Kansas?
I couldn't hear you, I'm sorry.
Okay, let me talk louder, sorry.
Yeah, just-
Okay, in today's polarized political climate, with me, how do you reach across the aisle and garner bipartisan support for issues that benefit most Kansans? And how do you go beyond party politics and pass Medicaid expansion?
That's an easy one because I do it all the time. You have to believe that just because you have Democrats and Republicans in the same building that you can actually visit with each other. When there are bills out there that really will not be of any benefit to anyone, and that we could change that endeavor and put a bill out there that we can pass. I think the biggest frustration that I had this year was that we had good bills below the line and we only passed 8 of them. And that was because we could not get individuals to switch because they were dug their heels in and says, no, because this is going to be a bipartisan, we don't want to have anything to do with it. Yes, you do. You have to get leadership in tow and say, this is a bill that needs to be passed. It's going to help someone. One that probably would have helped during this crisis. So you have to work bipartisanly and put your heads together and see how you can first enhance upon that bill, make sure that it's going to be able to be passed, talk to the Democrats and to the Republicans together, say we have to use ourselves and get this done. Maybe even bypass leadership.
Ryan?
I want to tag on Diana's very last thing. Sometimes it seems like there's a huge agreement amongst most members of the House and Senate about a lot of really big issues, and it seems to be sometimes that leadership stands in the way. And I think that there's definitely some work that needs to be done with the views and communication between leadership and the rest of the bodies in the legislature. Communication is definitely key. I have already some really good acquaintances and friends that I have met who are members of the legislature who are not a member of my party, and we have talked about some issues that we have in common, and that, of course, is the thing that we have to start with. Is start with the things we have in common. You put put a few pennies in the bank so that you can take out the money that you need later when you really need something, and that's a good way, I think, to start working and moving forward.
Thank you. Phil?
The very first thing you need to do is to recognize that the person with whom you are speaking is a human being, and my assumption is they really truly believe that they're doing the right thing for the people of Kansas. So that's the first step. Now, I've been teaching college American government for years, and the students come in, man, I'm ready to show these people. But when they get to the assignment where I require them to articulate the opposing position in a rational, in a reasonable way, that's where they stumble. But you cannot expect to persuade somebody if you don't understand and can't articulate where they're coming from. So that's something I've worked on for years, and by experience in the community as a Democrat with a target on the back, right? There he is, get him. So I've learned to work with people and learned to understand where they're coming from. That just comes from experience.
Thank you. Randy?
In the Senate, there's 40 senators, and so the important number there is 21. It takes 21 votes to pass anything. And so when I am representing this district, I will take issues back to Topeka that I'm told are very important, good highway system. And so when I get back to Topeka, all I have to do is I say, well, who's in favor of highways? Raise your hand. And I'm looking for 21 votes. And I don't really care what party. All I care is about winning and winning for the district. And I've done that several times, just walking around chatting with other senators, and that's the other thing you do. Not 10% of the work is done in the chamber, 90% of the work is done outside the chamber in offices and the hallways and the rotunda, and that's the part I really enjoy doing. I have good relationships with every senator.
Thank you. The next question starts with Ryan. Is that where we are? Okay. Okay. Sorry. Kansas law presently preempts local government's ability to set a local minimum wage. Given comments in support of home rule, would you as a legislator work to overturn this preemption, allowing Salina to set its own minimum wage?
That's an interesting idea. Yeah, I think I would. I think that would be a really interesting idea. I think it would be a really interesting experiment, and to see what happens if some counties decide to do that and some don't. Yeah.
Thank you, Phil.
Back about a year ago, I spoke to the City Commission about starting a study on single-use plastic bags, and one of the concerns they had was that home rule would be overturned. That's a huge concern. We should be very, very concerned about the state coming in and saying, here's what your municipality can or cannot do. And it doesn't matter whether it's a living wage or it's plastic bag bans, whatever it is, we need to make sure that home rule is in place, which is a statute. I mean, this is part of who we are. And the idea that someone like my former representative Clays would come in and say, well, no, you can't do that. While they're complaining about the federal government coming in, by the way, I think it's ridiculous and unconscionable. We need to make sure that home rule is supported, and I will always support home rule.
Randy?
I generally believe in home rule, but there are a few things that I think need to be uniform throughout the state, and in this particular case, I think throughout the country as well. If you have different speed limits on I-70 all the way across the state, you could run into all kinds of issues, and that's determined on the state level. I think the best way to deal with minimum wage is actually on the federal level, because you're going to have all kinds of discrepancies, and I'm thinking mostly with the border situation in Johnson County and then bordering Missouri, that you have to have consistency across the borders, state borders, as well as from cities inside the states. And I think that that would probably be the preferred way to go for minimum wage, but it does need to go up.
Diana?
I am a firm believer in the local rule. In fact, before I sign on to a bill, I always try to check with the entity that it would affect the most. I give them a call and say, what do you think about this? I want to know the pros and cons, because we're not an expert on everything. And that's how I know whether or not this is a bill that needs to be passed. Then I encourage them to come to the State House, if there is such a bill, to be a conferee. And that way we know that, they can stand right in front of that committee chair and the body that's therein and tell them and answer their questions, so that they know more than what just one person would know as to how that's going to affect each and every community. Then it needs to go to the other communities as well. But once it's passed and we can get it above the line, which is the problem that we've been into most of the time, we can get that bill above the line, we can get it passed. And everybody will work together to make sure that leadership knows that we want this above the line.
Thank you. The next question, we'll start with Phil, right?
Yep.
Yes. Today, Governor Kelly announced an executive order to push back the start of the school year until after Labor Day. Do you agree with this order, and how can Kansas schools safely open this year?
Well, whether I agree with it or not, the governor's got the best data at this point, so I'm going to go along with it. I am concerned that as it gets more cold, we have more opportunities for the COVID virus to come back, so that concerns me. Again, I think if we give teachers, if we have enough patience and we give them the resources, they'll figure out a way to either do some form of online, in-class, or a blended version, and they'll make this thing work. But we put a lot of restrictions on there. If we withhold the funding they need to do it, and if we make it impossible for them to do their job, well, that's just going to make it that much harder. So in general, I've agreed with what the governor's said so far. Again, I'm a little concerned about the cold and what that'll do, but we got to figure this thing out. Again, we got to learn to bend and not break and not knock our mask off. So, thank you.
Thank you. Randy?
Whether that was a good decision or not, I don't know, but I think that ultimately the local school board should make that decision. My guess is that having an extra 3 weeks would give schools enough time to put a very solid plan in place that protects both the teachers and the students. I think that ultimately, I like the idea of the local school boards being in charge. They know their situation better than anyone, and they might come up with the same solution, but doing it independently.
Diana?
When you look at all the school districts that there are within the state, the confines of the state, realistically, you really need to have, again, it goes back to that local connection. The local school boards know their district best, and they might come up with a different idea that may fit into that district particularly better than perhaps Kansas City versus Salina. And just before I came here, I had a call from one of the board members, and she was very adamant that, that really we need to get back to the board and let them decide what consequence and what benefit it's going to be, and then pool everything together if they might be a compromise that might be able to work statewide.
Brian?
I don't know that we yet have enough information about the executive order as to the why we're closing till Labor Day. If it's actually for districts to work on safety plans, or if there is some other thing. I'd like to also know about the ratification from the state school board, and I like their input on it, and I hope that Governor Kelly consulted with the state school board, and I also know that the State Finance Council has a dog in this fight also, and so that there are multiple stakeholders who also have to sign off on this first, even before we do this. But we also have to consider the health and safety of our students, faculty, staff, and of course our community as well. And if that is the number one reason, I think that is something to support. But again, there are some school districts out there that don't have any cases in their community, or they may have 1 or 2 cases, and that's a little bit different from Wichita or Salina or in the eastern part of the state. So I think there has to be some flexibility and local control.
Let's see. Are we started? You ready?
I think I just started.
Yeah, right, okay. Okay. There are lots of questions here about working across party lines, and I know we've talked about that a little already. This one says, in your own words, what happened on the last day of the legislative session this May? That's usually a ceremonial day. Was that effective use of the legislative process, and what would you do to make the legislature more effective and collegial? Talk to us about working across party lines and making the legislature more collegial. Randy.
I was frustrated, annoyed, mad that final day because we were being bullied on the Senate chamber floor, and I did not appreciate that. It was we were having forced legislation forced down us, and I think that the solution to that, of course, is different leadership. When I voted for leadership the first time around, I did it in December, early December, and it's a decision you make for the next 4 years. I really didn't know the leadership all that well. Now I do. And if I'm lucky enough to be reelected, I am really going to be careful about my vote, because I know all the players and I know who is good for Kansas and who might not be.
Thank you. Diana?
I love that question. I was just as frustrated as Senator Hardy is. We did nothing. And, you know, we usually do work bipartisanly, but leadership just stymied everything. We were on the House floor doing nothing from morning until night. I took a picture of my lunch. I had a muffin and a cup of hot tea, and that was my dinner and lunch, because we had to raise our hand in order to be excused to go to the bathroom. That was the last straw. We are a body of people who represent the people in our districts. And leadership, yes, can be leadership, but there is a fine line there where I just flat said, no, we are going to do this all together, the Republicans and the Democrats. We are going to get at least one or two of these bills passed.
Thank you, Brian.
I agree with Senator Hardy and Representative Dirk'S that Senate leadership was a problem. I hope that you guys will be responsible in electing new leadership, as hopefully I will if I'm elected. Nothing good happens after midnight, and nothing good did happen after midnight on that last day of the session. And one more Democratic vote could have broken the Republican supermajority and could have prevented all of that from happening.
Thank you. Phil?
You know, I've been studying American government for years, and it's a messy system. I mean, there's just nothing easy about a democracy, and frankly, there's nothing easy about Kansas. I think maybe that should be our motto. Ain't nothing easy about it. These processes have been there We're going to have to deal with them in the future. If you want better representation, then vote for the better representative. But we're going to continue to go through this, what was it Mark Twain said, sausage-making process? The two things you shouldn't see is that or legislation. It's just part of our system. But in the end, it's a good system, not those specific rules, but that our democracy is a good system. It's resilient. It's withstood uncountable chaos, including a civil war. So I agree, we could change the procedures. We need to get better people in there, but don't give up on the system. It's not over. Just hang in there.
Thank you. Randy, is it your turn, or are you?
I think Diana's next.
Okay. All right. Okay, letting people know what their government is up to has a long tradition in the United States. And for more than a century, that has been done by requiring that changes in the law be published in the local newspaper. Given that the number of people who read any local newspaper in Kansas has dropped by 80% or more in the past few years, would you favor changing state law to allow for a more effective method of letting the public know what their government is doing?
That's a good idea.
Diana. Is it Diana?
Yeah. Me?
Diana.
Oh, Mike,
Diana.
oh. I didn't get quite the last of it. Could you
Well,
just,
it asks if you would favor changing state law to allow for a more effective way of letting the public know what their government is doing.
actually, the representatives should be doing that by email, newsletter. I usually send out a newsletter. I email back home. I make telephone calls. But again, there is the relaxability there that they're not able to. But I feel that we should have some sort of a something on the radio, telling the people who reside here in Salina what's going on. I did a newsletter, and then I also put in my newsletter, I don't know if all of you got them, but or not, but I put a questionnaire in there for them to answer. And I read every single one of them, and I will keep those for when I'm able to go back to Topeka, say, okay, this is what my constituency wants. Maybe perhaps we can work together, get leadership on board, and get some of these things done that they have questions about, or make the changes that they would like to see in Topeka.
Brian?
Can I ask for a quick clarification? Are we talking about the legislators communicating with people, or like, say, the Journal publishing public notices?
I think it's the Journal publishing public notices, which nobody reads anymore, so, or maybe it's articles. There's not a total clarification here.
Okay. Well, I mean, I strongly support our local news organization, the Salina Journal, and I think the answer is maybe not in print anymore. I think the answer is to beef up an online presence, and I hope that, I support journalism as a whole, and I think that their role in providing us with a service to demonstrate transparency at all levels of government, federal, state, and local, is a really, really important service. And I think that some of that, they depend on the public notice revenue, that would be correct. But I think that that's incredibly important. I think that's something that should be left with the papers of record in each city or county.
Phil?
I subscribe to Salina Journal, the Kansas City Star, the Wall Street Journal to get the conservative side, the New York Times to get the liberal side, the New Yorker, Foreign Affairs, and Political Science Quarterly. So I guess I'm one of the 20% that still reads a paper. Unfortunately, about 6 companies own all of the media, so that's kind of a problem. And the idea of a legislator sending home a newsletter, well, I can just imagine what Susan Wagle had to say. That probably was some good reading. But anything we can do to implement the open meeting laws, I think is a good thing. People also have to take responsibility, take the time to actually read or learn whatever they can to learn the issues themselves. But anything we can do, I'm totally for an open meeting. I think it should be all recorded. People should be able to go back and look for it. I think there's nothing but good in doing that.
Thank you. Randy?
We may be talking about a couple different things. When I was on the Salina City Commission, all of our ordinances have to be printed in the newspaper, and that's when they actually become effective. On the state level, we have all of our statutes and then our bills that are passed, and they are all listed in our journal. And so it's a little bit different process there. But in terms of transparency, I think, as Representative Dirk'S said, we have to, a lot of us have our own email list. I have 600 people every week during the course of a session. I send out my emails and I tell everybody exactly how I voted and what the big issues are. And so that's a good way to communicate, or else going to kslegislature.org to see what bills are being debated, what has been introduced, what bills have passed, what haven't, and that sort of thing.
Thank you. All right, we have time for one, maybe two more questions. Start with Ryan. What strategy do you propose to balance the budget in view of the lower sales tax and income tax revenue due to COVID-19?
Okay. Legalize sports betting, legalize medicinal marijuana, stop corporate welfare, and tax breaks and cuts for the super wealthy multinational corporations, let's just say it, the Koch brothers. I think we can do a lot that way. But again, I also want to say, I think there's some great ways to raise revenue, but I'm not so sure that we will face a lot of cuts. I mean, we are as close now to the January 21 session as we are to Christmas of 2019. And the developments between last Christmas and now are mind-blowing. I can't imagine what's going to happen in the next 5 to 6 months either. So, I mean, speculation is really hard, but some of my ideas I've already talked about previously and then just now.
Thank you. Bill?
Well, the Wichita Eagles, another paper, by the way, had an article in January 2019, I think it was, or was it a year ago, or this January? Anyway, they said that because of exemptions, we're passing up $1.9 billion with a B dollars. Now, Clark Sanders really rode me on this 10 years ago, and I said we need to get rid of the exemptions. But I don't understand why a conservative Republican would want to not get rid of something like that. Why would he want to spend money needlessly? So anyway, that would be one way to do it. Of course, legalizing marijuana, which should take, that's not going to happen anytime soon. But I do think that the low-hanging fruit would be the exemptions. And beyond that, we're in no man's territory. This stupid mask. We're in no man's territory. It's unclear how this is going to be in the future. We don't know what our revenues are going to be. So we need to be resilient, be able to bend and not break, and let's grab the low fruit.
Thank you. Randy?
I was so proud when we reversed the Brownback tax policy back in 2017 and put the LLCs back on to the tax rolls. The tax revenue started coming in again, and when we left in 2019, we had $1.1 billion in a rainy day fund. And thank heaven we had that, because COVID has just wiped all that out and created a $1.3 billion hole now that we have to fill by June of 21. It's going to be a really hard, difficult problem to resolve. Anytime you want to raise taxes, that's very, very difficult in the legislature, and it's good that it's difficult. And we'll be looking for things. We'll be looking for idle funds. We'll be looking for increases in budgets that we allowed this last budget cycle.
Diana?
We'll be looking for other ways to use
Randy,
money
we have to stop you
differently.
there. Stop. Yes. Diana?
I couldn't memorize this, but I will cover a couple of things that happened. This was Senate Bill 30, and it talked about from Brownback's, what they did in that turn. Said the bill allows an itemized deduction for individual income tax purposes, 50% of medical expenses, currently allowed under the federal law. The amount is increased to 75% of the federal allowable amount for tax year. 100% in tax year 2020, and itemized deductions for mortgage interest and property taxes paid. So they were ratcheting it down to where it would help the taxpayer. Child and dependent care tax credit that had been repealed in 2012 is restored. Credit is set at $12.50% of the allowable federal amount for tax year 2018, and then it just ratchets down. You cannot have a budget by cutting taxes. You have to be able to know what your budget's going to be, because nobody knows what the incoming income's going to be, and especially during this time of an atmosphere.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That is all the time we have for audience questions, so I will turn it over to Abner for the closing remarks.
Okay, we have folks here running for 3 different positions, and kind of an unusual situation. So what I'd like to do in the closing comments is group things by the positions and not worry about whose turn it is next necessarily. I think I will start at this end of the table and go to my right, your left, and start with the first race. The first race is Democrats choosing choosing the candidate to run against Clark Sanders in the 69th district. So these 2 gentlemen, Dr. Phil Black and Ryan Holmquist, are the candidates. They both showed up. They both shared their views. I appreciate that very much. And
We're Democrats.
and we will start with the overly eager, the very
Outgoing.
Dr. Phil Black gets his minute, followed by Ryan Holmquist. If we could do that, starting now.
You know, imagine you have a business and you decide you're going to open an office in Topeka, and there's only going to be one person working there, and you have 2 candidates. One who has 18 years of related experience and the other one doesn't. That was a kind of a clever metaphor I came up with after Ryan filed. But with this COVID-19 virus, we have unprecedented challenges. We have no clear idea what the future is going to be. Every single decision we make in the legislature will be consequential. This is not a time to do guesswork. It's certainly not what we see in Trump. This is a time to rely on data and experience. I'm Phil Black. If you will allow me, I will take my experience, my knowledge, my ability to work the halls of the Capitol and go and represent you in the 69th District. Thank you for being here.
Mr. Holmquist.
Well, I'm Ryan Holmquist, and I have outlined a lot of my priorities for working families in the 69th District. I think the things that are the most important are eliminating the food sales tax, getting people health care who can't afford it, making sure working families get a fair shake. We need effective and empathetic leadership, and I can provide that. I appreciate your vote on August 4th.
Thank you, candidates for House District 69. Now, in the House District 71, Diana Dirk'S is a Republican choice. It's the Republican choice to see who will run against Jeff Zammerslaw, I believe.
No, Stephen Howe. I still
But-
have a primary.
The 2 Republicans are Stephen Howe and Diana Dirk'S, and the winner of those 2 will face in the final election Jeff Zammerslaw, I believe. At any rate. So, Stephen Howe chose not to be here. Diana may make a minute of closing remarks, please.
Again, it's my honor to be here and to hopefully answer some of your questions. And if you ever have any additional questions, please feel free to call me. On my card, I put my telephone number, I put my email address, because of those who I might not be able to visit with because of the restrictions of space. And that way, they have it right there handy, because you never know when you're going to come up with a question. It's been my honor to serve you in Topeka. I will continue in the same aspect as I have in the past years. It's going to be difficult. Some of our meetings are going to be difficult. They're going to take some really tough decisions. I think experience is really going to play a big part of this, because we know what's happened, what type of allocations we can come up with, how are we going to fund some of the situations that we find ourselves in. But the biggest thing is each and every one of us, whatever district that they serve, we have to remember that they are serving everyone, Republicans and Democrats, when they go to their vote. They have to listen to each and every one of them. Thank you again for inviting me.
In the 24th Senate District, J.R. Clays is running against, and he's absent today, against Randall Hardy. The Republicans in the primary, August 4th, get to make that choice. There is no Democrat or independent running for that position. So, Randall Hardy.
Thank you.
Closing.
During my term in office, I have made constituent service a hallmark of my work in Topeka and at home. I answer constituent emails, I return telephone calls, and make time for district visitors to the Capitol. I present Senate tributes to residents turning 100 and help district residents resolve issues like unemployment insurance. I make annual visits to local governments and school boards and communities throughout the district. I write thank you notes daily to State House visitors from the district. I truly feel honored to be visited by local residents. Lastly, my office number in Topeka is forwarded to my cell phone while not in session. I have worked hard to represent the citizens of the 24th Senate District well. In my mind, the voters in the district are my bosses, not special interest groups in Topeka. If re-elected, I will continue to work for you, your families, and your businesses. You can learn more about my campaign and get involved by visiting randallhardy.com. I ask for your vote on August 4th. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of the candidates, and if we had an audience here, we would give you a round of applause.
We can give each other applause.
Thank you. Thank you to all the League of Women Voters members and family members who have helped us do this. Thank you to Salina Media Connection and to Smoky Hills PBS for being here, and thank you for all of you who wrote in your questions. Remember to vote in advance or on August the 4th. Thank you so much.